Well, billions of dollars have been spent, billions of more will be spent, both coping with the ongoing ravaging effect of a pandemic, but also the government has alluded an effort to stimulate the economy post-pandemic. So how might it best be spent, and what's the level of transparency that Canadians deserve? John Manley is a former Deputy Prime Minister and former Finance Minister, now a Senior Advisor at Bennett Jones. John, good to have you with us. And let's start with the billions more that might be spent. We don't quite know how. As a finance minister, when you think about that, if someone said, here, you've got up to $100 billion to stimulate the economy, what are some things that would come to mind as likely places that you could spend that would have the most effect?
Well, the clear thing that has to be done is to really rebuild the capacity of the Canadian economy to produce. So things that will improve our productivity, something we haven't done very well in this century, things that will enable investment to flow in from the private sector. So infrastructure, sharing the infrastructure development, perhaps with private sector, digitization, the digital infrastructure, not to mention digitalizing government in how it deals with its citizens. So there are things that really need to be focused not on consumption, but on ongoing investment.
On that front, I mean, it's obviously this pandemic has called for a lot of creative and quick response, and so we forgive mistakes when things happen fast. There is one area that I'm just going to beg you to give me your view on, and that is our abysmal failure to test. We never did get it right. I think now the government's kind of holding its nose and hoping we get to a vaccine, and we never need to test. But we still don't have basic contact tracing, basic short-term testing, stuff that most other developed nations have, John. Why are we not holding the government to higher account on this front?
Some days I wish I were in the official opposition, although those days are few and far between, because that's the key question. I understand even Canadian companies have produced rapid tests that are still sitting waiting for approval by Health Canada. So they seem to have responded on the Pfizer vaccine in a very timely and rapid fashion, but things have gone very slowly to approve the instant testing. There are pilot projects that have been utilized at some of the airports. I think there's one right now in Calgary, and yet we still hang back on this. And it seemed to me, Amanda, for months now, that if we had testing and tracing and masking and social distancing, most of our economy could be back to normal. But we don't have those first two ingredients.
And so, I mean, and it's, again, we forgive a lot in the early going, but as we contemplate hundreds of billions more in spending, is it right to say, well, let's see what you did so far and what you did right? There are new concerns being raised about the level of transparency of the spending so far, especially dollars to businesses. Now, you and I both know there are good reasons of confidentiality, and there's all kinds of procedural stuff, why it's not, in the morning paper who got what. But at what point do taxpayers get to know where the money went and how it was used, and with a little accountability?
Yeah, it's going to take a while. And of course, the money was going out in a fire hose, so it's all over the place. And I suspect that in the bureaucracy, a lot of the attention was on how do we get the next dollar out the door. There are companies that are on the verge of failure. We need to deal with that rather than responding to access to information requests in order to provide a whole lot of additional data. In the public company sector, of course, a lot of that information is already in the public domain as a result of the financial quarterly filings that have been made. So if you want to know, as CBC apparently did last week, how much Air Canada got, that's probably disclosed in their filings. So we're really talking about the private and smaller company sector, and it's a lot of money. But the priority, I think, has been to keep them in the game rather than dealing with a lot of the accountabilities that will necessarily flow in our system.
And therefore, do you think it's inevitable that at some point, both from individuals, because there are folks who did receive the emergency benefit who may well see money clawed back, and from big business, that at some point if there is a right outcome that says you shouldn't have received that money, will the government have the wherewithal to claw it back?
Oh, I think so, but I think it's going to take a while. And I think there's going to be a lot of forgiveness. Let's put it that way. The way I describe it, the house was on fire. So, and all we could do was we formed a bucket brigade and we hauled water, to throw on the fire. A lot of it got spilled out of those buckets along the way. But the priority was to try to get as much as we could onto the fire. And I think there'll be a lot of forgiveness for that. We know, for example, that we just know from the statistics that we see in household savings rates that the government replaced more income than was lost, and saving rates went way up. It's probably the same in the corporate sector, that some companies received at least as much, if not more, than they had lost. So I think we're going to have to see.
We always appreciate your perspective on this. John Manley, of course, former finance minister, deputy prime minister, senior advisor, Bennett Jones.